The reality is that this offseason conversation didn't start because the Eagles wanted it to. It started because the season ended earlier than anyone in Philadelphia was prepared to accept. And once that happens, everything gets put under the microscope. The loss itself still stings, but what followed is what really set this fan base into motion. The confirmation that Kevin Patullo is no longer running the offense as it existed. A symbolic ending that felt inevitable to anyone who watched this unit week after week. In a strange way, that decision injected optimism back into a fan base that should be angry, frustrated, and exhausted. Instead of a pure group therapy session, this has turned into a moment of reflection mixed with anticipation. Because for the first time in months, it feels like the Eagles are choosing a different path. The bar right now is not complicated. It's not about chasing perfection or inventing something revolutionary. It's about competence, structure, sequencing, and giving the quarterback answers when things break down. That's why the conversation immediately shifted toward the offensive coordinator search, and why so many names are being taken seriously. The Eagles didn't wait around. They moved early, and that matters. Despite the anxiety that comes from seeing other teams line up interviews, the truth is simple. No outside offensive coordinator has officially signed elsewhere. The window is open, and the Eagles can talk to just about anyone they want. That early move is already paying dividends in flexibility, and it's why this search feels different from past cycles. There's been a lot of noise, but the substance of the discussion keeps circling back to experience. Not recycled ideas, not empty buzzwords, but real NFL play-calling backgrounds. Todd Monken keeps coming up for a reason. His work speaks for itself. He's run top 10 offenses, he's coordinated elite units at both the NFL and college levels, and most importantly, he understands how to build an offense around a mobile quarterback without limiting what that quarterback can be. The comparison points are obvious. Baltimore didn't just let Lamar Jackson play, they empowered him. They built flexibility into the system, leaned into spacing, balance, and adaptability, and trusted the quarterback to make decisions. Watching that offense compared to what the Eagles put on film this year feels like night and day. That's where the frustration with last season truly lives. Too often, if a play didn't work exactly as drawn up, there was nowhere for Jalen Hurts to go with the football. Reads felt static. Adjustments felt non-existent. Fans watched routes get covered, pockets collapse, and still saw no built-in outlet. That's not sustainable in the NFL. And it's why so many people defend Hurts by pointing directly at the structure around him. Every quarterback has limitations. The job of the coordinator is to hide those limitations and maximize what the player does best. This offense rarely did that. Monken isn't the only name generating legitimate excitement. Brian Daboll is another candidate that quietly makes a lot of sense, even if it's uncomfortable for some fans to admit it. His head coaching stint didn't work out, but that doesn't erase what he's done as a play caller.
He's worked with Jalen Hurts before. Hurts himself has spoken about how Daboll helped him understand NFL progressions and offensive structure. Daboll has maximized mobile quarterbacks at multiple stops, from Josh Allen to Daniel Jones, and he understands how to evolve an offense as a quarterback grows. Sometimes, failure as a head coach simply means someone is better suited to focus on offense, and history is filled with coordinators who thrived once they returned to that role. The deeper this list goes, the more obvious one thing becomes. The Eagles don't need to gamble on inexperience. They don't need another learning-on-the-job experiment. There are proven play callers available, and almost all of them would represent an immediate upgrade. That alone tells you how low the standard fell by the end of the season. Even average offensive coordination would feel like a leap forward. Better sequencing, smarter use of personnel, more motion, more answers against pressure. These aren't lofty demands. They're baseline expectations for a roster this talented. There's also a bigger organizational message hidden in all of this. The announcement about Patullo came directly from Nick Sirianni, and that matters. It signals stability at the head coach position. This was the Eagles drawing a line and saying the collapse wasn't going to cost Sirianni his job, but it was going to cost the offense its current direction. That's consistent with how this franchise operates. They don't panic after one bad ending. They adjust, they reset, and they try again with better infrastructure. The move suggests Sirianni will be back, the next coordinator will be heavily vetted, and the expectation is immediate improvement. The interesting tension now is not whether the Eagles can hire a good offensive coordinator, but which philosophy they choose to embrace. Do they want someone who challenges the quarterback and pushes the offense forward even if it creates friction? Do they want someone who adapts to player preferences and simplifies things? Do they prioritize long-term continuity or short-term upside? Every candidate brings a different answer to those questions, and the decision will shape how this team looks for years, not just next season. This isn't about winning the press conference. It's about restoring trust between the film and the scoreboard. Fans aren't asking for miracles. They're asking for an offense that makes sense when you watch it, one that gives its quarterback options, one that doesn't feel predictable by the second quarter. The Eagles have an opportunity right now to correct course in a meaningful way, and the fact that this conversation even feels hopeful says everything about how badly change was needed. What keeps this conversation alive is that the choice the Eagles make here will quietly answer a lot of unresolved questions about the direction of the franchise. This isn't just about replacing a play caller. It's about deciding how much control the offense is going to give back to structure versus improvisation, and how much responsibility is placed on the system instead of the quarterback having to be perfect on every snap. For most of last season, the margin for error felt impossibly thin. If the protection wasn't flawless or the first read wasn't open, the play was essentially dead. That's not championship football in today's NFL, and everyone in the building knows it. One of the reasons there's cautious optimism right now is because the Eagles aren't boxed in. They're not reacting late. They're not settling. They're surveying a full landscape of experienced minds, and that allows them to be intentional. Whether it's a coordinator like Todd Monken who brings a proven, layered offense that evolves week to week, or someone like Brian Daboll who understands how to teach quarterbacks within the flow of an NFL scheme, the common thread is credibility. These are coaches who can walk into the meeting room and command respect immediately, not because of titles, but because of tape. That credibility matters when you talk about Jalen Hurts. This season exposed how badly he needs an offense that gives him flexibility without putting everything on his shoulders. There were moments where it looked like he was being asked to solve impossible problems post-snap, with no built-in answers. That's how turnovers happen. That's how drives stall. And that's how narratives get unfairly attached to quarterbacks who are forced to operate inside rigid structures. A smarter coordinator doesn't just call better plays. He creates margin. He creates options. He gives the quarterback a way out when the defense guesses right. Another layer to this is continuity. Fans are understandably tired of the revolving door. Every time the offense shows life, the coordinator becomes a head coaching candidate elsewhere. That's the cost of success in the modern NFL. But not all candidates carry the same risk. Some profiles suggest stability, not because they lack ambition, but because teams have already seen them as head coaches and moved on. That doesn't make them lesser coaches. In many cases, it makes them more dangerous as coordinators, because they've been humbled, refined, and forced to focus purely on what they do best. There's also the reality of how this impacts the rest of the roster. Wide receivers thrive on timing and variation. Tight ends need creativity to be more than safety valves. The run game needs commitment, not just as a tendency but as a weapon that sets up everything else. Too often last season, plays felt isolated, as if each snap existed on its own island. Good offenses tell stories over the course of a game. They set things up. They bait defenses. They punish adjustments. That was missing, and it's why fans felt like they could predict what was coming before the snap far too often. This next hire has to restore that identity, not by copying another team wholesale, but by building something that fits the Eagles' personnel and evolves as the league adjusts. The talent is here. The window is still open. What's been lacking is cohesion and intent. That's why this moment feels bigger than just filling a vacancy. It feels like a crossroads, one where the Eagles decide whether they're content staying competitive or serious about taking the next step. The fan base can feel it too. That's why the reaction hasn't been pure anger. It's been analysis, debate, and cautious hope. People are arguing about philosophy, not just names, and that's healthy. It means expectations are high, and rightly so. This roster isn't built to reset. It's built to contend. The front office knows that. The coaching staff knows that. And now the pressure is on to align those pieces correctly. As this process continues and more clarity emerges, the truth will reveal itself not in rumors, but in the kind of offense the Eagles commit to building next. This decision will echo through training camp, through the early weeks of the season, and through every moment where the offense either has an answer or falls short again. Before this continues, I want to know where you stand. Which direction do you believe makes the most sense for the Eagles right now? And what matters more to you in the next offensive coordinator? Proven structure, adaptability to Jalen Hurts, or long-term stability? What hasn't been talked about enough is how this decision will expose the internal power dynamics inside the building. Whoever becomes the next offensive coordinator is not walking into a vacuum. Nick Sirianni is still the head coach. Howie Roseman is still the architect of the roster. Jalen Hurts is still the franchise quarterback. The coordinator has to fit within that triangle, and last season showed what happens when that balance is off. When no one clearly owns the offense, the result is an identity crisis that shows up every Sunday. That's why this hire has to come with authority, Not ego, not stubbornness, but clarity. The Eagles cannot afford another season where the offense feels like a compromise instead of a conviction. If the run game is going to be a foundation, it has to stay a foundation even when things get uncomfortable. If Hurts is going to be empowered to change plays and exploit matchups, that has to be designed into the offense, not improvised out of desperation. The next coordinator needs to set rules that actually help the quarterback, not trap him inside predictable looks. There's also a misconception that simplifying an offense automatically helps a quarterback. Sometimes it does, but what we saw last season wasn't simplification, it was reduction. Fewer concepts, fewer answers, fewer ways to attack defenses once tendencies were exposed. Defensive coordinators aren't fooled by basic structures for long. They study, they adjust, and when an offense doesn't counter, it gets strangled. That's exactly what happened. The Eagles weren't beaten by superior talent most weeks. They were beaten by preparation and adaptability. That's why experience matters here. Not just years in the league, but scars. Coordinators who have been solved before learn how to evolve. They understand that what works in September won't work in January unless it grows. That growth was missing, and it's why so many fans felt like they were watching the same problems repeat themselves with no correction. The frustration wasn't emotional, it was logical. People could see it coming. This is also about protecting the long-term investment in Hurts. The organization has already committed to him financially and philosophically. The next step is committing to an offense that allows him to succeed without having to be superhuman. That means better answers against the blitz, more variety in route combinations, and an overall structure that doesn't ask for perfection on every snap. The league is too fast, too smart, and too ruthless for that approach to survive. The encouraging part is that the Eagles seem to understand the urgency. Moving early, keeping options open, and prioritizing proven candidates signals a front office that knows it can't waste another year of this roster's prime. This isn't a rebuild. This is a recalibration. Small changes in the right places can have massive effects, and offensive coordination is the biggest lever they can pull right now. As this continues to unfold, the noise will get louder. Names will come and go. Rumors will fly. But the real test will come when we see the offense on the field again. When the first signs of adversity hit, does the offense adjust? Does it respond? Does it give its quarterback and playmakers a fighting chance every series? That's what this is really about. Now I want to hear from you. What kind of offensive identity do you want to see the Eagles commit to moving forward? And which traits do you think are absolutely non-negotiable in the next coordinator? Another part of this that can't be ignored is how much last season quietly eroded confidence inside the offense itself. You could see it in the body language, in the hesitation before the snap, in how quickly drives unraveled once something went wrong. When players don't trust the structure, they start pressing. Receivers rush routes. Quarterbacks hold the ball a fraction too long. Linemen guess instead of reacting. That snowball effect is real, and it doesn't show up in one stat or one play, but it shows up over the course of an entire season. That's why the next coordinator has to restore belief as much as production. Players need to feel like there's always an answer, that even if the defense wins a snap, the offense is prepared to counter on the next one. Great coordinators build that trust by being consistent in philosophy while flexible in execution. They don't abandon what works after one bad series, and they don't stubbornly force what isn't working just to prove a point. That balance was missing, and it's something veterans notice immediately. There's also a leadership element that goes beyond the whiteboard. The Eagles have strong personalities in that locker room. They need someone who can communicate clearly, explain why things are being done a certain way, and get buy-in without it feeling forced. When players understand the why, they play faster. When they don't, hesitation creeps in. That's especially true for quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts doesn't need to be micromanaged, but he does need structure he can trust. An offense that empowers him doesn't mean giving him everything he wants. It means giving him a framework that helps him make the right decision more often than not. This is also where Nick Sirianni's role becomes critical. The head coach doesn't have to call plays, but he does have to ensure alignment. Last season felt disjointed, like the offense was operating without a clear North Star. This hire is Sirianni's chance to reset that alignment. Bringing in a coordinator with a strong identity sends a message that the offense will have a clear voice again, not a committee, not a compromise, but a direction. From a fan perspective, that clarity is all anyone is really asking for. You can live with losses. You can live with growing pains. What's hard to accept is watching the same issues repeat with no visible adjustment. Eagles fans are some of the most knowledgeable in the league. They see when things don't add up. They see when defenses know what's coming. They see when players are put in tough positions. This fan base doesn't need to be sold hope with slogans. They need to be shown a plan that makes sense.
The reality is that this off-season conversation didn't start because the Eagles wanted it to. It started because the season ended earlier than anyone